Hey everyone, Sully the Scourge here, bringing you brand new developer blog news. Now I realize there's a lot of videos out there covering this already, and most of them are just reading you the facts, right? Reading you the information already out there. But I assume most of you can read. What I'm going to be doing here today is actually translating that, giving analysis into what this actually means for the future of Neverwinter, because I haven't seen a lot of that yet, and that's really what people want to know. What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my character? So if you could take the time, please subscribe to the channel. I'm under 1,000 subs still. I'm still a small growing channel. Would really help me out. It really helps motivate me to keep producing out good content for you in the community. So we're going to start here with item level and scaling. And the first takeaway here is one item level is going to be equal to 20 rating points, right? So that means if you use a rank 14 Radiant, which are very popular in power sharing classes. Whether or not power sharing even exists in the future of Neverwinter, we don't know because they're doing massive changes. But right now, Radiants are very popular, right? And they only give 1,000 power. Whereas a Tri-stat enchantment like a Black Ice, at rank 14 gives 1,400 power. That means you're missing 400 raw stats, which translates to now you will be missing 20 extra item level off each enchantment if you do go with a single stat enchantment. So that's one quick minor takeaway. The other thing here is scaling. Now, when I read this, to me, it seems to be forced scaling put in the game. A lot of people are just glossing through this when they're reading through all the blogs to you. But my takeaway from this is it appears that Neverwinter is doing forced scaling in all dungeons, right? So they talked about how it's traditionally not worked out for them. They wanted to scale down players harder. Their current formula wasn't working, which means basically if you're into doing K-Team, do it now before these new harder scaling changes take effect, right? Because the downscaling is going to be a little bit more vicious on your character. Um, and the thing you have to realize is they're raising the item level cap to 80, right? They're talking about we will now scale a player down to target item level, and this does mean that players who are put in a lower difficulty dungeons will find it more challenging in the past. Now, what is a lower difficulty dungeon, right? At first glance, you might think, oh, well, could it be the leveling dungeons? They're pre-level 70 content, they're lower level dungeons, right? But now you got to realize that all the dungeons currently in game as of mod 15 are somewhat lower difficulty dungeons, right? Because they're not going to be level 80 dungeons. We're getting a new level cap. We're getting a new level 80 dungeon from the looks of it. So everything before it is now kind of lower difficulty. My takeaway from this, it appears that they're trying to nerf the ETOS farms that have been popular in the game forever for quick AD. Right now, farming regular demo is very popular because you just melt it and it's a joke. So to me, it looks like they're introducing item scaling kind of on all content, um, on dungeons, which is gonna really impact how easily you earn rough AD. I might be wrong, but that's my takeaway on reading this. Alright, we're gonna move on here. Again, they're moving to level 80. You're gonna get a new daily encounter at Wills. That's pretty much expected. We already expected some new variety because they're doing massive class overhauls anyways. Not only new ones, but probably changes to already existing ones. The campaign's going to be the Undermountain. So, whether, Undermountain being underneath Waterdeep, okay, it's a small difference to me. Underneath the United States is still the United States to me. To me, it's more just like a failure of coding, right? Like they didn't have the resources to give us all Waterdeep and the Undermountain, so they're just picking and choosing. But it's whatever. We'll get probably the rest of Undermountain anyways. Right here's an important thing though. There's going to be new seal gear, new dungeon equipment, and even new higher item level artifacts players enjoy. This is kind of a big problem for me. Personally, I'm an Xbox player. I have very little motivation to min-max my character right now, to grind out for current gear, to log into the game and put in work on my character because I know all these massive changes are coming in the future, right? And when you're on Xbox and PS4, we know about these changes, but they're still so far away. But basically, I know any work I put in now is just going to be so heavily devalued by this next mod that I have very little motivation to log in and play. Most of my playtime is spent gathering money, gathering astral diamonds, because I know then I can buy the new stuff as soon as it comes out. But to actually grind out current gear, I have very little motivation to do this. So I really think they need to get their release dates more in sync with each other with the PC and console. I know it's a hard thing to do. I know it requires, coordination and verification by Sony and Xbox, but they really need to do that because it really does hurt the game and it hurts player activity basically. All right, so we're gonna go into the hard math now, the stats. So not only will we have stats, but enemies will have stats too, and it's gonna be a lot more abundant and a lot more clear. So they talk about opposing rolls, and they use critical strike as the example. Now they give their own example here of a crit chance and enemy um, crit avoidance. I'm gonna use my actual character stats, right? My actual character's stats in game, and I'm going to use their formula here to give an example why it's a little bit it's kind of a double nerf, at least in terms of crit, which is what they chose to highlight here in the developer block. So my character has a critical rating of 30,539, and this translates to a 76.4% critical chance. Now my character has over 100% crit chance, some of that's coming from outside sources, boons and other things, but purely based off of rating, right? I have 76.4% chance off my critical rating. So we're gonna just round that for easy math here, and round that to 30,500. Now we're gonna take an opposing critical rating off of monster. Down here, they talk about the first zone in the Underdark. Enemies will have 16,000 as their stats. So they're going to have 16,000 critical avoidance. Now this is going to go higher. Again, this is the first area of the Undermountain. Will the second, third, fourth, fifth area of the Undermountain have higher numbers? Probably. Will dungeons have higher numbers? Will bosses have higher numbers? Almost certainly, right? But we're just going to use their numbers that they provided, right? So we'll go back up here to our percentage. I'm going to take my 30,500 minus the enemy 16,000. We're left with 14,500. Now we've got to divide that by 500, right? And I wind up with 29% critical chance. Now that's very low, especially compared to my previous, 76% that I was getting off my raw stats. The thing you gotta realize here is it's always going to be lower because they are actually hard capping your crit chance percentage at 50%. So you're never going to regain your full glory of, a full crit build. Now they're actually going to give you a bonus 5% default. So we'll take the 29% that I calculated. I'm going to wind up with 34% crit chance off my current value. Again, previously that was giving me 76%. It's basically a massive nerf because A, again, it's capped, and B, this 34% crit chance is a smaller percentage of the whole 50%. It's just, I don't know. I don't know why you would even try, which really has me wondering whether or not the owlbear cub will be good again. If you're an old school player, you might remember owlbear cub 0% crit builds were pretty popular in the game. There were a lot of powers that hit for zero or that never critted. It was so popular in previous mods that A, they had to nerf the owlbear cub and put an internal cooldown on it, and B, they had to make certain powers crit so that you couldn't do it anymore. With these changes to crit strike, it makes me wonder if I'm better off in my build not even worrying about crit, slotting in an owlbear cub and shifting those stats into other things. It's something I want to try. Again, I wasn't invited. I wasn't part of the public beta, so I will be doing that hopefully on the live server. So stay tuned to the channel. I'm going to be seeing if the owlbear cub's making a comeback. But these are some massive, massive changes. All right, to go back to main ratings, we now have awareness. Not entirely sure what that is, but accuracy, right? Like, let's take a common sense, approach to what accuracy could be. It should probably be whether or not you actually hit or whether you miss something, right? Whether you miss an attack. Does that mean I can hit for 0? Does that mean I can whiff an attack completely? It should be interesting, and especially how the coding on it works. If I miss because of accuracy, if I fail to hit, do I miss completely? Do I get no secondary benefits off that attack? Do I do a hit for 0, which still procs boons and still procs secondary effects? I don't know, but accuracy looks very, very interesting. You also have some changes. Some stats won't have rating, but just flat percentages. One's action point gains, right? So how are AP kicks gonna work on your rings anymore? Will they just give a flat boost now? I don't know. They talked about removing regen here, which was another kit you could previously make and throw on rings. How these new kits are gonna work in the new system, I really do not know, but we'll see. So they talked about removing recovery here, and they kind of gave it for lore reasons, right? Like they say, okay, well, in Neverwinter lore, your daily power should be used once a day. Your encounter powers, like once an encounter, and they are right on the fact that I very rarely use my at wills. I use my at wills as a finisher. I use everything else multiple times more than I use my actual at wills. At least on a Scourge Warlock. It's different across classes. So they kind of try to justify removing recovery for lore reasons. But to me, over here in the class balances, they talk about trying to move away from 4th edition D&D lore into 5th edition D&D lore because they don't want to be bound by lore reasons. So they give lore kind of as a justification for removing recovery, but then they talk about, oh, how terrible it is to be bound to lore and how they're trying to free up the game more. So I don't know if this is a fair justification, if it's just an excuse for something they want to do. We'll have to see the actual hard math numbers, and we won't be able to do that till we get a live build, right? Till we get to play this on preview to see how big of a change the removal of recovery is, what kind of outside cooldown reduction sources we have available to us. We just won't know. So I won't comment on that. I just want to comment that changing it for lore reasons didn't really strike me the right way. Also removing lifesteal now as a warlock. Lifesteal was always a big build. That was our main build around stat. Kind of different classes had different stats that were supposed to be their build around. Ours was supposed to be lifesteal, so I'm interested to see, the direction of the warlock. We'll get into classes here in a second. But again, they've got some hard caps. Deflect is now capped out at 50%. And then we have combat advantage becoming more important, more integral to the game. Because now you can cap this out at 100%. They've been putting new enchantments, new artifacts to kind of help get new sources of combat advantage bonus for a while now. And so this is kind of the end game for that. So let's get into classes. Like I said, they're leaving beyond 4th edition, trying to move into more familiar territory, as they're calling it. Big things here. I'm no longer a Scourge Warlock. I'm just a Warlock. Are they going to give me a name change? How am I Sully the Scourge if Scourges don't any longer exist? I mean, maybe that's a minor problem, especially compared to Great Weapon Fighters, because they're just gone. They're now barbarians. Whether you like it or not, if you are a Great Weapon Fighter, you are now a barbarian. Welcome to the new world. So maybe you think this is irrelevant, right? This is just, oh, it's just a name, it's whatever. But here, if you want something hard and fast, look at this. Barbarian. Tank DPS. I'm not going to read into which, they listed first or anything like that. But um, barbarians, great weapon fighters, they've always had kind of a tank capstone. It very rarely got used. But here is the very, very interesting part, and it has to do with reworking on shields. Paladins, fighters, currently Guardian fighters, and Barbarians, currently Great Weapon fighters, all have a redesigned guard which provides a shield equal their maximum hit points. So hit points, building it on tanks, very important because you're basically getting it double effectiveness. You're getting it A up front on your character and B when you shield. So really good to build hit points. Their guard absorbs damage until it's depleted, at which point the damage hits the player directly. So we're talking about a redesigned guard potentially for barbarians, which are great weapon fighters. So basically, it's always been a joke that paladins, guardian fighters, not as much because they have Into the Fray, but in general, they walk slow because they don't have a dash, right? And the joke always was that great weapon fighters always ran ahead and were first to a mob, and because they were first to a mob and they're always running ahead brain dead, that they get themselves killed all the time. It's become meme status. And the meme might be dead because now that they're pushing great weapon fighters more into a tank role, if they completely removed their sprint and gave them a guard, gave them a shield mechanic instead, there's no more great weapon fighters running first into a mob, before everyone leaving everyone in the dust. We'll have to see how it works because they do have a DPS loadout too. So will their DPS still have a sprint and only the tank have a new redesigned guard, or will the entire class just have one redesigned guard? I don't know. It's very interesting, and if I was a great weapon fighter, I'd probably be pretty angry if I could no longer sprint. Let's be real. The rest of Neverwinter might be celebrating because, like I said, it's a meme that the great weapon fighter is going to run ahead and get themselves killed. So who knows? But that seems to be the direction. We also have what seems to be the end of random public queues. Now, why do I say that? Well, you finally get something that people have been asking for. Like, Warlocks can queue as a healer. You can have Barbarians queue as a tank now. Guardian fighters can queue as a DPS. You might think these are good things, but the reality is in random queues we were already having massive, massive problems with Guardian fighters running as DPS, but basically the queue recognized them as tanks. You would get MSP, right? You would get a Guardian fighter, and they would say, lol, I'm DPS. And the whole team would just wipe over and over and over again because you didn't have a tank. Now that we have so many classes being able to queue as support roles, um, basically the distinctions are going to be meaningless, right? Like the queues will pop, but if you've got your clerics queuing as a healer or your warlocks queuing as a healer and switching to DPS, and you actually need a healer now because there's no lifesteal, then it's just going to be fail group after fail group after fail group. So I don't know how they're going to rework the way that random queues work because right now you have so many classes that can just have a loadout to queue in as one thing and switch to another. And if you actually need a tank and you actually need a healer to actually finish the dungeon, it's going to be a pain. And I suspect that it's going to make a lot of failing groups happen in public random queues. So get a guild, get a play group that you're happy with. Now they talk about capstones are no more, right? So we're gonna have new powers, some unique, some shared. Basically, you get 5 pairs of feats under each paragon. So they don't exactly share if any of these are shared between the paragons or not, because they talk about unique and shared at wills, encounters, dailies. They don't mention that here. So it actually looks like a decent amount of variety as long as none of these are shared, none of these feat pairings, right? Because whereas before you had 3 capstones that you could go through, and then each had different choices along the way. Now you don't necessarily have capstones, but you have basically 4 paths, right? Because each let's take cleric for example. Each healer is going to have 2 different paths along the way, and each healers or each DPS is going to have 2 different paths along the way as well, for a total of 4. So that should be interesting. You see now Ranger, Rogue, and Wizard are the DPS, are the double DPS Paragon paths. It's kind of interesting because Wizard historically has been a little bit more of a support class. Now it's one of the very few pure DPS classes. So that should be interesting. I know also buff debuff uh, or buff HR builds have been gaining in popularity. Again, they're one of the pure DPS classes now that don't have one of these support roles attached to them. So other things. This is something that bothered me. Maybe this is nitpicky. Um, talks about healing here a little bit, but talks about warlocks using soul essence now to heal. Previously, we healed based off lifesteal. Again, our class was based off lifesteal heavily in its initial conception. Now lifesteal no longer exists in the game, but talks about formerly soul shards. This is a typo. It should be soul sparks. It's a minor detail, but again, maybe this is nitpicky, but you have to get these minor details correct because if the names aren't correct, it's a community player based thing. How do we trust you to get, the minor details within the builds correct to achieve class balance? So hopefully they get this fixed and updated. Sorry for pointing it out, but as a warlock, a little bit personally hurt that they don't know my powers names. Um, anyways, again, I covered this shield. Hit points are going to be really important on all tanks. Again, the sprint should be a big deal. Um, but I think that covered about everything I wanted to. I appreciate you all being here. I hope this provided some good insight. I hope this was more than just reading it to you. Like I said, I appreciate it if you could sub to the channel and help out. Stay tuned because I'm going to be testing things. I'm going to be covering more information, giving more analysis as everything keeps continuing to come live and to the public here. So again, thank you for watching.